All right, hello again everyone. This is Davis from Hardin County Conservation. We are now into the second week of May and we're getting an even greater warm up in temperatures. We're starting to see more sunlight, longer photo periods throughout the day, and we're getting some new vegetative growth compared to the stuff that we showed you last week. So again, just like the first week, some of that stuff's going into dormancy from last week and we're getting new plants to emerge. And one of the ones that I'm going to talk about is actually right next to my feet here, and we have a bunch that I'm actually just going to do in one sequence rather than dividing up the video. So for those that have not been to our property before, this is the back trail section that runs immediately adjacent to our pine plantation, which is just over my shoulder to the right here. But you guys can definitely come down and take a look at this. We have a few different species here I'm going to talk about. We have Jack-In-The-Pulpit, which is going to be my first one. We have wild ginger, which will be my second one. We've just gotten nodding trillium the last couple of years, so I'm going to discuss nodding trillium because that's in bloom. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is just wild violet. So I'll start with our first one here. This is a Jack-In-The-Pulpit. And there's lots to talk about with Jack-In-The-Pulpits. They're a pretty unusual plant. So this one here actually has two leaves that come up out of the plant, and they are always in threes. So we see this is a leaf here, and this is a leaf here in my hand. And in the middle here, we actually have a flower. So with this plant, because it has two leaves, that tells me that this is a female plant. These can actually be males or females. One way is to look at the leaves. If they have two, generally it's a female. If they have one, it's generally a male. So this tells me very likely it's a female. If I'm not 100% sure, what I will check is down here at the base of the flower. I see that there is no opening at the bottom, which tells me for sure this is a female and not a male. If this were a male flower, there would be an opening at the bottom. But the Jack-In-The-Pulpit does something pretty interesting. So they are what we call a false pitcher plant. And what that means is, if you guys have ever seen pitcher plants like in the Amazon, for instance, or in tropical locations, they actually emit a smell that attracts certain types of insects. Could be flies, could be gnats, any variety of things. And there's actually a digestive enzyme inside the flower that will dissolve those insects that fly in there. This plant does not quite do that, but it does something similar. So the reason we call it a false pitcher plant, it does not actually digest or kill the bugs that visit this, but it emits a smell that is similar to a fungus that attracts gnats and flies and beetles and other insects. And what happens is those bugs will fly up into the flower, so we'll get back on the flower here. They will be attracted to this flower. They'll kind of come in and they'll land on the edge of the inside of the flower. And they're on the inside, there's kind of a slippery wall, and those insects will actually lose their footing and they'll go down in there. And if it's a male plant, those insects will get covered in pollen in the bottom. And when they're covered in pollen, what the male does, he actually allows the insect to leave through the bottom opening. So again, if it's a male plant, it's got that opening at the bottom. He will allow that insect to leave and go visit another plant. If the bug then visits let's say a female Jack-In-The-Pulpit, that insect again will come inside of here, it'll fall in, but if it's a female plant, that insect actually gets caught in the bottom here, and it cannot work its way out of the flower, so it will actually get in there and it can die. So it gets too heavy, too coated in pollen, can't fly very well, might get coated in some of the liquid and stuff that's on the inside of there and loses its traction. And inevitably it just dies in the bottom. And actually, I can't show you here, but looking in the bottom, there is a gnat that's in the bottom here that is dead in this flower. So unfortunately, there is one that did not make it out of there. But nonetheless, this is a great way to pollinate yourself and move yourself around the forest. And it's interesting too, when we look at Jack-In-The-Pulpits, oftentimes the female plants will have small males that just kind of pop up all over the place. So as I walk behind me towards the ranger here, I have a male Jack-In-The-Pulpit, another male Jack-In-The-Pulpit. I have one male growing here and one male growing here, almost right on top of that other one. So those males pop up all over the place to try to have the best chance to be able to pollinate those female flowers, or so they can produce new flowers. So that's a little bit about the Jack-In-The-Pulpit. Interesting plant. You guys can kind of see it all over our forest. I'm going to slide down here just a hair, and right next to it we have our next plant. This is going to be wild ginger. Just like the plants that or the root that you would buy from the grocery store, actual ginger. This is a very aromatic plant, so it smells just like the ginger you would find at the grocery store. It is edible in small amounts. If you eat too much of it, it actually can be toxic. And in this plant, generally when people do forage for it, you don't eat the tuber or the root like you would in the ginger you get in the grocery store. Instead, people often pick the stems and the leaves. But this plant, again, is rhizomatous, just like our Virginia waterleaf and false rue anemone that we mentioned in past videos. So it does spread by rhizomes, which is why we have this great big patch of it right here. The leaf is very much shaped like a violet leaf, except it's more wide and pointed at the end, and it does not cup up like a violet does. So right here, we have our ginger leaves, and you can see there's bunches of patches of it. And it does get a flower, but the flower is very hard to find in a lot of these because it does not grow above the plant. Instead, it grows underneath, and here is one right here. So we have a teeny tiny little red flower. It's cup-shaped. And if I were to put this back, there you go. It grows right underneath all of that leaf structure. So again, this is wild ginger. Very cool plant. We have this kind of all over our forest, and they definitely do better in habitats that have not been disturbed. So they're actually a pretty high quality individual. And they do like to be in kind of low-lying wet areas. So you'll see we have an oxbow back here that's kind of grown up now, but it's all full of ginger. Jack-in-the-Pulpits can be upland, but they do, most often they're associated with some lower sections of the forest, low-lying areas. So we have Jack-in-the-Pulpit, we have wild ginger. Why don't we jump back here to our nodding Trillium, since this is the one individual that I have in this patch. And I'm just gonna kind of move some of this stuff out of my way. Very distinct plant. Actually, when we first saw this, I was walking down the trail and immediately caught my eye because it's taller than most of the other vegetation and the leaves are absolutely enormous. So when we talk about trilliums, that the name tri in the first part of the name, so trillium, tri, means it's always going to have three. So 3 leaves right here. If we look at the flower, 1, 2, 3 white petals, so it comes in 3s, trilliums. This is in the same family as snow trillium, so close relative, just gets taller. This is very similar to May apple. Even the flower is very similar, but what's going to set it apart from the May apple is the number of leaves and the number of petals on that flower. So they may look similar, but they are very much distinct, very different. So this has this beautiful white flower, one of my absolute favorite plants that we get here in the forest. And actually we've only found this as of recently, so the last 2 years. We've come down here, 3 or 4 years ago when I first got here. You couldn't hardly find it anywhere. So these are definitely remnant individuals that have been in seed in the ground for some period of time, and they've actually just started to sprout up and get the right conditions to be able to grow. And if you walk the kind of the upper hill slope here, you'll actually see these scattered around the forest all along that really tall hill slope. So these do grow in our forest, but only really in this one particular strip. So definitely come out and check this out. I think I might put this one in a scavenger hunt for you families to come out and do. So remember this one carefully for sure. So we did Jack-in-the-Pulpit, we did wild ginger, we have nodding trillium here. One thing I didn't mention with this, the reason it gets its name nodding, it is actually nodded over. So it looks like it's nodding, and the flower is bent over underneath the leaves. So looks like it's nodding. And then I think the last one we'll talk about is one that I haven't mentioned because it is so common. And let's scoot up here so you can see some of these. But I was talking about wild violets. And we do have a few species of wild violets here. We have a yellow violet, we have just your generic purple violet, and then we actually get a subspecies that has a color blend that's purple and white. So kind of an interesting one. But I will show you the yellow violets here, and maybe I have a better example back here. Yeah, here's a good one. So here is our yellow violet right here. And here are the leaves right next to a wild ginger here. So remember how I was talking about the leaves are wider on a ginger? Here's the ginger leaf, way wider than the violet. The violet definitely cups up more. It's got more of that cup shape. This guy does not. It stays a little flatter. But this is the yellow violet flower right here. And the cool thing about this yellow violet, if you can see inside the flower, and it's really hard to see, there are actually black rays inside of there. And those rays, just like some of the other plants we've talked about in previous videos, put off ultraviolet light or reflect ultraviolet light, and it attracts certain types of pollinators. So this one generally is pollinated by a variety of butterflies and bumblebees in particular. Bees love violets. But this species is much more generalist than the last three I talked to you about. So Jack-In-The-Pulpits, wild ginger, nodding trillium, those need pretty high quality, undisturbed ecosystems to be able to grow. Wild violets can just grow in your yard. So they grow all over the place. One thing I will say, the ones that you will see most often in your yard are going to be purple. Yellow violets do tend to be more in the forest, and then the purple and white ones I generally see as a more of kind of an edge species, so you'll see them where even your lawn or prairie grass transitions to forest habitat. So they do have some different areas they like to inhabit, but nonetheless, great plant to see. One we haven't talked about, these have finally flowered, which is great. And as you can see, we have tons of green behind me still. So we're going to wait for some more flowers to pop up. But this is basically going to do it for this video. Just kind of a short and sweet synopsis. We wanted to take you through just a small section of our forest to show you how common some of these plants are, what you can come out to Calkins Nature Area and look for. Again, we will tell you, please do not pick this stuff. Don't walk through it like I am. Just kind of admire it from the trail, because we want to have this here in the future, and we want to have people that can come out and be able to look at it and learn about it just like you guys are through this video. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave it in the comments section below, and we will answer those for you. Otherwise, if you're wanting to stay up to date with what's blooming, what birds we have coming in, any of that kind of stuff, you can visit our Hardin County Conservation website. You can visit our Hardin County Conservation Facebook page, our Calkins Nature Area Facebook page. You can follow us on Twitter at Hardin Conserve, or you can just send us emails, or feel free to call us at the Nature Center here. So we hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for kind of tagging along on this more unique project.